This video is brought to you by Brilliant. While we may be in a new year, the problems that plagued the country last year persist. We're still in winter and many people up and down the country are struggling to heat their homes and pay their bills. Ultimately, two things are to blame for this so-called cost of living crisis: inflation and energy bills. Now, both inflation and energy bills, which are legally determined by gas and electricity prices, are something affecting all countries. But the UK seems particularly badly affected. Why is this? Is this just unfortunate, or was this the fault of government? Let's have a look. Okay, so first of all, we need to establish whether the UK has actually been particularly badly affected by both inflation and energy prices. Luckily, there is a rather easy way to tell. There are indices for each of these. As of November 2022, the UK had the second highest CPI inflation level in the G7, coming behind only Italy at just under 11%. Germany also has pretty high inflation, with a figure of around 10%. The US has a figure of only about 7.5%, Canada about 7%, and Japan at only 4%. Clearly, while all countries have been struggling with inflation, the UK seems to be one of the worst affected. The same story, sadly, is true of energy prices. The website Global Petrol Prices has put together an index which comprises gasoline and electricity prices for different countries. For 1 litre of gasoline, the global average price is $1.29 as of the 2nd of January 2023. For the US, this is only about 89 cents. European countries tend to have a much higher cost, with 1 litre of gasoline costing $1.71 in Spain, $1.75 in France, $1.78 in Portugal, and a huge $1.84 in Germany. In the UK, a litre of gas cost $1.85, which is one of the highest both in Europe and the world. In fact, the only countries from the EU27 that have a higher gasoline price than the UK are Sweden, the Netherlands, Italy, Belgium, Greece, Finland and Denmark. Things look even worse for the UK when we move to look specifically at electricity prices. The average price worldwide per kilowatt hour of electricity is 11 cents per kilowatt hour for households. For Canada, it's about 11 cents. For the US, it's about 16 cents. For France, it's about 22 cents, Japan 26 cents, and with Ireland and Spain following shortly after. For the UK, it's about 47 cents, the third highest of the 148 countries analysed. The only countries with more expensive electricity in the world are Germany and Denmark. Now, it should be noted that this data is from June 2022, which is fairly significant because since then, the UK government introduced a lot more support for households to help them with their electricity bills. So, potentially, electricity prices may be lower by international standards. However, irrespective of the issues with the electricity data, the point remains that energy prices and inflation are just very high in the UK by international standards. So why is this? And is this the fault of politicians? Let's take each in turn, starting with energy. The UK is in a unique position when it comes to energy suppliers. In essence, the UK had a lot of small energy providers at the time of the invasion of Ukraine. This wasn't by chance, it was by design. In 2010, the UK's energy regulator, Ofgem, actually encouraged small energy suppliers to enter the market in response to the market domination of the so-called Big Six energy suppliers. The Big Six generated their own electricity, whereas smaller energy suppliers simply acted as a middleman. This on its own isn't actually too bad, but by 2019, the government introduced something called the energy price cap. As the name suggests, it caps the amount that energy providers can charge for energy, and this was updated every 6 months. This was because energy prices fluctuate, and energy companies, it was reasoned by the government, should be able to charge customers more when they themselves have to pay more for energy. The issue here is that when Russia invaded Ukraine, energy prices shot up, but the energy price cap had not yet been updated to reflect this. Because there were so many small energy companies who were able to compete and charge little for energy because they didn't have a rainy day fund, they ended up collapsing. In total, more than 20 companies representing more than 4 million customers went bust and couldn't survive paying more for energy than they were legally allowed to sell it for. This meant that many people were then, as a last resort, moved to bigger energy companies who charged more for energy. in many European countries, this isn't how the energy market is set up. Energy companies are required to have processes and funds that are able to shield them from these kinds of sudden price hikes. The fact the UK didn't have this was one reason why people ended up having to spend more on energy. Additionally, even aside from the setup of the energy market, the UK's reliance on gas and lack of storage didn't help either. Prior to the invasion of Ukraine, gas was often purchased from Russia. The boycott of Russian gas means that there's less of it going around, pushing the price up. Here in the UK, about 40% of electricity is produced using gas, whereas less than 20% of electricity is produced using gas in the European bloc. Now, there was some good news. Even though 40% of the UK's electricity came from gas, about half of its gas was produced domestically from North Sea gas. The issue here, though, was that North Sea gas produced very little last year due to maintenance work. And to make matters worse, the UK also doesn't really store much of its own gas. In fact, in 2017, the largest storage facility was closed, but reopened in October last year, although only at a fifth of its previous capacity. This meant that the UK didn't have any cheap gas stored up, and instead was forced to pay top dollar for gas. So that's why the UK has disproportionately been affected by high energy costs. Moving on to inflation. Now, one of the big drivers of high inflation right now is the cost of energy, which we've obviously already covered. But another big driver is the slump in the pound. As the pound has become weaker over the last year, both against the dollar and euro, imports have shot up. In addition to this, post-Brexit trading barriers have also been shown to have pushed food prices up. UK and a changing Europe have estimated that between December 2019 and September 2021, these barriers drove food prices up by 6%. So, energy prices, a weak pound and trade barriers made the UK more susceptible to high inflation than EU countries. Now, we said at the top that we'd briefly discuss whether any of this was the fault of the government. As you've seen, the government is not to blame for the war in Ukraine and the subsequent high cost of energy. The government does, though, have the ability to prepare for these things by implementing legislation that requires energy companies to have a plan for when energy prices increase. Additionally, the weak pound is as a result of political decisions made, for example, by Prime Minister Liz Truss. The post-Brexit trade barriers are a result of not only the Brexit negotiations decided by the government, but also the political decision to leave in the first place. The point is that the UK is faring worse, partially because of a lack of planning and previous decisions that didn't take situations like this into account, and partially just because of bad luck. Now, heading into 2023, everyone's hoping that issues like this will resolve. But if world leaders are anything like us, resolutions and plans for the new year are already out the window. If you do want to improve yourself, though, maybe pick up a new resolution and sign up to Brilliant, the STEM learning platform which helps you with exciting new science and maths topics through engaging and interactive experiences. Their courses, including ones co-designed by YouTubers including Kurzgesagt and fellow Nebula creator Real Engineering, bring the topics to life and let you learn by doing, not just sitting in a class like at school. That means that all kinds of topics which previously seemed a little too complex might suddenly be in your grasp. That's things like algebra, geometry, the physics of every day, or even gravitational physics. So up your game in STEM in 2023 to improve your understanding of the world, boost your career, help at school or university, or even just for the sake of lifelong learning. Plus, the first 200 people to sign up using our code get 20% off an annual premium subscription, which is probably a bigger win than most people's 2023 resolutions have been. Anyway, thanks for your support.